There is a truth most people never admit. It's not your potential that fails you. It's your inability to stay consistent long enough to see what you're truly capable of. Most people start strong and fade fast. They begin with fire and end with excuses. They push hard for a moment, then disappear the moment life becomes inconvenient. And deep down, they know it. That knowing becomes a quiet shame, one that eats their confidence from the inside out. Here's the part no one tells you. You don't fail because you're weak. You fail because you stop. You stop when you're bored, when you're stressed, when no one is watching, when the excitement dies and the work becomes ordinary. Inconsistency is not about laziness. It is about a mind that has never been trained to follow through. It is about old systems running your life while you keep trying to change outcomes without changing structure. And every time you break a promise to yourself, your identity fractures a little more. You stop trusting your own word. You stop believing you can finish anything you start. This is the real cost of inconsistency. It's not the unfinished projects. It's not the delayed goals. It's the loss of self-respect. But there is a turning point. One powerful enough to shift everything. Consistency has nothing to do with emotion. It has everything to do with structure. People who show up every day aren't superhuman. They simply refuse to negotiate with their feelings. They build systems that carry them when motivation dies. They live by standards, not moods. And when you operate from standards, everything changes. Your mornings stop controlling you. Your distractions stop owning you. Your excuses stop defining you. You become someone you finally trust again. Most people live in reaction. They wake up and check their phones before they check in with themselves. They let noise dictate their mood. They wait for motivation to save them, not realizing motivation is the most unreliable force in life. What they truly need is a system, one that removes randomness, one that removes emotional decision-making, one that makes consistency inevitable instead of optional. Over the next chapters, you will learn how to build that system. This isn't another motivational talk meant to hype you for an hour and abandon you the next morning. This is training. You will learn how to win your mornings so your days can't derail you. You will learn how to protect your focus so distractions lose their power. You will learn to step into discomfort the moment your mind tries to retreat. You will learn why keeping small promises transforms your confidence more than chasing big goals. And you will finally understand something life-changing. Consistency is not a personality trait. Consistency is an identity you build. You will discover how to push when you want to stop, because the moment you want to quit is the exact moment growth begins. You will learn how to replace old habits instead of fighting them. You will learn how to show up in silence, without applause, without recognition, without validation, because private discipline always becomes public success. And once you lock in your daily foundations, consistency will no longer feel like a battle. It will feel like who you are. This journey isn't about creating a new life. It's about creating a new level of self-command. You don't need motivation. You need standards. And if you're ready for that shift, then let's begin. Chapter 1. Control your mornings. Win the first hour. Win the day. Most people lose their day before it even starts. They wake up already behind, already overwhelmed, already drowning in noise. Their phone becomes the first voice they hear and the last voice they obey. They don't begin their day with intention, they begin it with reaction. And once you begin in reaction, everything that follows becomes a fight you are destined to lose. Your morning is not just a time of day. Your morning is the command center of your identity. When you hand your first moments to distraction, you hand your power away. And that small surrender creates a pattern that repeats itself through every hour that follows. You check your phone for a minute and lose your focus for half the morning. You scroll through other people's lives and forget what you wanted for your own. You let the world speak before you speak to yourself, and your mind falls into submission before it ever gets the chance to lead. You cannot build consistency on a chaotic foundation. The way you begin determines the momentum you carry. If the first decision of your day is weak, The rest of the day quietly adopts the same weakness. But if your first decision is strong, even a small act of strength, your mind begins to recognize itself as someone capable of command. That shift, that identity shift, is the root of all discipline. Strong mornings begin with stillness. Weak mornings begin with noise. Stillness gives the mind space to breathe, to remember what matters, to step into the day with clarity rather than confusion. When you choose stillness first, you remind yourself that you are the one in control. You dictate the direction. You initiate the action. You lead the day rather than being dragged through it. There is a reason high performers guard their mornings like sacred ground. They understand a simple truth. The world tries to pull you in 100 directions, and your morning is the only moment where you can choose your direction without resistance. When you let chaos in before you set your compass, you spend the entire day trying to recover the focus you lost in your first 10 minutes awake. One of the most powerful ways to reclaim your mornings is to set an anchor. An anchor is a simple action that signals to your brain, we are in control. We choose how this day begins. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be deliberate. It might be a slow breath before your feet touch the floor. It might be acknowledging your goals before anyone else's agenda intrudes. It might be a small moment of movement that tells your body it is time to rise, not drift. When you start with intention, your mind becomes sharper, your decisions become clearer, your energy becomes more disciplined, and most importantly, you create a psychological pattern. If you win the first moment, you expect yourself to win the next. This expectation builds momentum, and momentum is the natural enemy of procrastination. Momentum makes consistency easier. Chaos makes consistency impossible. Imagine two versions of you. One wakes up, checks notifications, scrolls endlessly, and instantly feels behind. The other wakes up, enters the day with clarity, directs their focus, and sets a quiet, internal standard. These two versions are living in the same body, but they experience completely different lives. The difference isn't talent or intelligence. The difference is the morning. When you surrender your mornings, you surrender your identity. You let randomness decide who you are that day. You give up the chance to build the consistent, disciplined, powerful version of yourself. But when you take your mornings back, even through small, consistent actions, you begin to rewrite your internal narrative. You begin to see yourself as someone reliable, someone intentional, someone who follows through. There is a psychological shift that happens when your first victory happens early. You start to feel like a person who wins. And people who win early fight harder not to lose later. This is why controlling your mornings is not just a habit. It is a strategy for identity change. It trains your mind to expect discipline from itself. It shapes the way you interpret challenges. It makes you less reactive and more deliberate. Most people wait for motivation to strike. But mornings don't respond to motivation. They respond to preparation. If your environment is chaotic, your mind will be chaotic. If your environment is intentional, your mind will become intentional. Your surroundings in the first minutes of your day become a silent teacher, reinforcing what you expect from yourself. Your morning is proof of who you believe you are. If you want to become someone consistent, start where consistency begins. When you choose order over chaos, clarity over noise, presence over impulse, you create a foundation strong enough to carry every discipline you want to build. And you make a statement to yourself that becomes impossible to ignore. You're in control now. Win the first hour. Win the day. Chapter 2. Protect your focus. Consistency dies where distraction lives. Most people don't lose their potential because they are incapable. They lose it because their attention is fractured into 1,000 pieces. Their mind is constantly pulled, tugged, interrupted, and drained before it ever gets the chance to lock on to something meaningful. They wake up with energy, but not direction. They end the day busy, but not productive. Distraction is not harmless. Distraction is identity theft. Every time you allow your attention to be stolen, a part of your future is stolen with it. You cannot build consistency when your focus is bleeding out through endless notifications, messages, alerts, and noise. Your mind becomes scattered. Your decisions become sloppy. Your actions become reactive instead of intentional. And slowly, without noticing, you become someone who never finishes anything. Here's the truth no one wants to admit. Your life is shaped less by your goals and more by what you allow to interrupt you. Focus is not something you magically find. Focus is something you fiercely protect. The world is designed to distract you, to fragment you, to weaken your attention until you no longer have the ability to stay with anything long enough to master it. If you do not defend your focus, you will lose it. And once you lose it, every other discipline becomes exponentially harder. There is a moment each day when distraction tries to take control. For some, it's the second they open their eyes. For others, it's the first time they sit down to work. The battle always begins quietly. A quick scroll, a harmless notification, a message you tell yourself you'll respond to just for a second. But that second always becomes minutes, and those minutes create friction, and that friction eventually destroys momentum. Momentum thrives in clarity. Momentum collapses in noise. When you allow your focus to be interrupted, you're not just losing time, you're resetting your mind back to zero. Every interruption has a re-entry cost. It pulls you out of depth and forces you to rebuild mental traction from scratch. And if this happens repeatedly, you will never reach the level of concentration required to be consistent. The human mind is powerful when it is singular. A focused mind can build, create, learn, transform, and execute with extraordinary speed. But a divided mind becomes clumsy, tired, cynical, overwhelmed, and unfocused. Consistency requires energy, and distraction drains that energy before you ever use it for the things that matter. Protecting your focus begins with environment. Your surroundings shape your attention more than your willpower ever could. An environment filled with noise will create a noisy mind. An environment built for depth will create deep work. When you intentionally shape your space, you send a message to your brain. Here, we concentrate. And the brain responds to that message with discipline. Your environment is your first filter. Your intentions are your second. Once your space supports your focus, you must reinforce it with intention. This means deciding ahead of time what deserves your attention and what does not. It means choosing to eliminate the small, meaningless interruptions that chip away at your capacity. It means refusing to let other people's urgency become your emergency. There is a kind of focus that feels like silence. It is the state where your mind sharpens, your actions align, and your day begins to move in a straight line instead of in chaotic spirals. This kind of focus cannot coexist with constant interruption. It must be protected, defended, guarded like something sacred. Your focus is sacred. Treat it like something priceless. One of the most powerful things you can do for your consistency is to create uninterrupted blocks of time. These are moments where you eliminate noise, silence the world, and step fully into your work. Inside these blocks, you experience a feeling most people never feel: mental depth. Depth is where mastery begins. Depth is where consistency becomes easier. Depth is where you stop fighting yourself and start working with momentum. Chapter 3. Build discipline. Through discomfort, growth requires friction. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is a personality trait, something you either have or don't have. They believe disciplined people wake up every day wanting to push themselves, wanting to face challenges, wanting to take the harder path. But the truth is far simpler and far more uncomfortable. Disciplined people don't feel different from you. They simply act differently from you. You don't build discipline in comfort. You build discipline in resistance. Comfort creates softness. It sedates your ambition. It numbs the part of you that wants to fight for a better life. When everything is too easy, your standards collapse. You stop demanding more from yourself because nothing around you is demanding it either. And slowly, you begin to shrink into the smallest version of your potential. Discomfort is where the real training begins. When you step into something that challenges you, even in small ways, your mind learns a powerful lesson. You can do hard things. This lesson rewires your identity. It expands the limits you once believed were fixed. It strengthens the mental muscles that allow you to follow through even when your motivation disappears. Every time you avoid discomfort, you strengthen your weakness. Every time you face discomfort, you strengthen your discipline. Humans are wired to seek the path of least resistance. This made sense when survival was the priority, but now it becomes the very thing that sabotages your progress. Your brain wants what feels good now, not what benefits you later. That's why you avoid difficult conversations. That's why you delay meaningful work. That's why you quit the moment the task becomes unpleasant. Not because you are incapable, but because you are untrained. Discomfort is the mind's gym. It is the place where your limits are tested, stretched, broken, and rebuilt stronger. Just as a muscle grows only when it is challenged, discipline grows only when you push yourself beyond your emotional comfort zone. You cannot think your way into discipline. You must experience it. There is always a moment where your mind hesitates. That moment is the doorway to your growth. When the alarm rings and you want to stay in bed, the doorway is right there. When the work gets hard and your attention drifts, the doorway appears again. When fear tells you to postpone something important, you are standing in front of the same doorway. Most people walk away, but the few who walk through it reshape their identity every time they do. Acting quickly is one of the most underrated disciplines. When you move before hesitation grows roots, you bypass the mental negotiation that kills consistency. You don't give your fear time to speak. You don't give your excuses room to form. You don't let your emotions take control. You simply act, and that action builds self-trust. Self-trust is built in micro moments of resistance. It grows when you show yourself that you can take action even when you don't want to. It strengthens when you lean into discomfort instead of running from it. And once self-trust becomes strong, discipline becomes more natural because you stop doubting your own ability to follow through. Discomfort also reveals who you really are. It exposes your patterns, your fears, your triggers, and your limits. It shows you the invisible walls you've built around yourself. Walls made of avoidance, insecurity, and self-protection. But once you see these walls, you gain the power to break them. You can't dismantle a barrier you pretend doesn't exist. Your relationship with discomfort determines your relationship with progress. If you avoid discomfort, you avoid growth. If you embrace discomfort, you accelerate growth. There is a unique feeling that comes from doing something hard on purpose. It gives you a subtle surge of self-respect. It reinforces a quiet pride that whispers, "I did what I didn't want to do." This pride is not loud or dramatic. It is steady and internal, and it becomes the foundation you stand on when the world becomes challenging. Discomfort also sharpens your emotional resilience. When you expose yourself to controlled difficulty, you become less reactive to unexpected difficulty. You stop panicking when things go wrong. You stop retreating when life gets heavy. You develop a steady mind because you have practiced steadying yourself in smaller battles. This is how disciplined people become grounded, calm, and consistent. Your mind adapts to what you repeatedly face. If you repeatedly choose comfort, your mind becomes fragile. If you repeatedly choose discomfort, your mind becomes unbreakable. And an unbreakable mind is the cornerstone of consistency. Chapter 4. Make smaller promises. But keep them. Tiny commitments create massive confidence. Most people don't struggle because their goals are too big. They struggle because their promises are too big. They overcommit, underdeliver, and slowly destroy the trust they have in themselves. They set unrealistic expectations in moments of inspiration, then collapse under the weight of those expectations when reality sets in. And each broken promise becomes another piece of evidence that they cannot rely on themselves. Self-trust is built in silence. Self-trust is destroyed in the same way. Every time you tell yourself you will wake up early, but don't, a crack forms. Every time you say you'll start fresh on Monday but quit by Wednesday, another crack forms. Every time you promise a new routine, a new habit, a new version of yourself, but fail to follow through, that crack deepens. Eventually, the cracks become so wide that nothing strong can stand on top of them. Not discipline, not consistency, not change. Your mind remembers everything you say you'll do. It remembers every intention, every vow, every private goal whispered to yourself that you never honored. And over time, it stops believing your declarations. This is why your motivation dies so quickly. It's not because you lack willpower. It's because you no longer trust your own voice. Big promises feel powerful in the moment. Small promises change your life. When you reduce the size of your commitments, you increase the probability of success. And with each small success, your identity begins to shift. You start to feel capable again. You start to feel stable again. You start to feel like someone who can rely on themselves. This shift is subtle, but it is the foundation of long-term discipline. There is something deeply transformational about completing something you told yourself you would do, no matter how simple it is. It might be a moment of movement in the morning, a few minutes of silence before checking your phone, a single action done with intention. The power isn't in the task. The power is in the follow-through. Consistency is built on follow-through, not intensity. Broken promises don't just weaken your discipline, they weaken your identity. When you repeatedly set the bar too high, you train your mind to expect failure. Failure becomes familiar. Quitting becomes normal. You start to choose goals not based on what is right for your growth, but based on what feels impressive to commit to in the moment. But impressive commitments mean nothing if they cannot be kept. A small commitment kept is far more valuable than a grand commitment abandoned. The person who builds self-trust slowly will always surpass the person who destroys it quickly. Small promises are powerful because they remove emotional resistance. They don't activate fear. They don't activate overwhelm. They don't activate self-doubt. They slip past the part of your brain that hates change and land directly in the place where action happens. When a promise is small, your mind says, I can do that. When a promise is huge, your mind says, maybe later. The difference between I can and maybe later is the difference between progress and stagnation. A life built on maybe later slowly becomes a life of regret. But a life built on I can becomes a life defined by momentum. Momentum compounds. Self-trust compounds. When you keep one small promise, you create enough confidence to make another. When you keep the next one, you create even more. Over time, these tiny wins accumulate into an unshakable belief that you are someone who follows through. This belief becomes the engine of your discipline. There is another hidden benefit to smaller promises. They teach you restraint. They teach you to aim for sustainability instead of spectacle. They teach you to think long-term instead of chasing the emotional high of an ambitious declaration. They teach you to prioritize progress over performance. You don't need a dramatic transformation in a single day. You need a reliable transformation over many days. The version of you who becomes unstoppable is not built in a single burst of motivation. It is built through steady, repeated commitments that are small enough to maintain but meaningful enough to matter. Most people fail because they try to change everything at once. They overhaul their routine, overhaul their habits, overhaul their lifestyle, and assume their identity will magically rise to match their ambition. But identity does not rise to meet ambition. Identity rises to meet consistency. And consistency rises from small promises kept without fail. The greatest moments of internal power happen when you choose to keep a promise on a day when you don't want to. Not because the task is big, not because the task is inspiring, but because you said you would. That is the moment discipline becomes anchored in your identity. You become someone who keeps their word, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. This is the kind of character that changes a life. Not talent, not luck, not bursts of effort. Character is built through the quiet honoring of your smallest commitments. There will always be a part of you that wants to make big promises. It wants to feel powerful. It wants to feel heroic. It wants the thrill of believing everything will change overnight. But heroic promises rarely create heroic results. Humble promises do. Shrink the promise. Keep the promise. Repeat the promise. Every day you do this, your identity strengthens, your confidence expands, and your consistency becomes easier. What once felt impossible begins to feel natural. What once overwhelmed you becomes manageable. What once defined your weakness becomes the training ground for your strength. Chapter 5. Finish what you start. Unfinished tasks weaken identity. There is a silent weight most people carry, and they don't even realize how heavy it is. It sits in the back of their mind like a shadow, always present, always draining energy, always whispering reminders of what they failed to complete. This weight comes from unfinished tasks, abandoned projects, half-built goals, and intentions that never made it past the starting line. And the more of these loose ends you accumulate, the more your confidence quietly collapses under them. Unfinished tasks are not harmless. Unfinished tasks shape your identity. Every time you start something and leave it hanging, you teach your mind a dangerous lesson. That quitting is acceptable, that follow-through is optional, that your word has no real power. Without realizing it, you become someone who leaves doors open and never walks through them. Someone who begins with fire and ends in ash. Someone who is constantly stuck in the cycle of almost committed, almost consistent, almost better. A lifetime of almost is the death of potential. There is a psychological cost to unfinished work that most people never account for. Your mind holds space for everything you started but never completed. It stores these fragments of effort like open tabs on a computer. The more tabs you have open, the slower everything operates. You feel drained not because your life is overwhelming, but because your mind is overcrowded with reminders of what you said you would do but didn't. This is why finishing matters. Finishing is self-respect in action. When you finish something you began, no matter how small, you reinforce the identity of a closer, not a quitter. You become someone who sees things through, who follows a path until it reaches its end, who refuses to leave pieces of their life half-formed. And that identity is the foundation of true consistency. Finishing is not about perfection, it's about completion. It's about drawing a line instead of leaving everything open-ended. It's about closing loops, so your mind can move forward without being pulled backward. When you complete a task you've been avoiding, you feel a surge of clarity that no motivational speech can replicate. You free up mental bandwidth. You restore inner order. Most people underestimate how much abandoned work weakens their confidence. Confidence isn't built by hyping yourself up. It's built by proving to yourself that you do what you say. Every finished task is a quiet victory. Every finished task is evidence. Every finished task is a vote for the kind of person you want to be. You cannot build a strong identity on unfinished business. A strong identity is built on completion. Finishing what you start also increases your ability to focus. When you constantly jump between tasks without closing them, your attention becomes fractured. You train your mind to crave novelty instead of completion. You become addicted to the excitement of beginning and allergic to the discipline of finishing. But the real transformation happens when you reverse this pattern. When finishing becomes your default. When you no longer chase the thrill of starting something new, but chase the satisfaction of closing what's already in motion. This shift rewires your brain. It deepens your discipline. It strengthens your emotional endurance. Finishing is emotionally uncomfortable. That's why most people avoid it. When you reach the final stretch of a task, resistance amplifies. Doubt becomes louder. Fear of imperfection kicks in. The closer you get to the end, the more your mind tries to pull you away, because the end is the moment of truth, where you face what you created, what you committed to, what you are capable of. That's why finishing is powerful. Finishing is identity surgery. Every time you follow through, your mind rewrites the narrative of who you are. You stop being the person who leaves things undone. You become the person who closes, completes, executes, and delivers. Even if the result isn't perfect, the act of completion becomes proof of character. There will always be a temptation to postpone the final steps. You will convince yourself that you need more time, more clarity, more preparation. But postponement is simply fear dressed as logic. It's the mind trying to avoid responsibility. It's the ego trying to protect itself from judgment. And it is the enemy of consistency. Completion builds courage. Avoidance builds weakness. Every unfinished task is a negotiation with your lower self. Every finished task is a declaration made by your higher self. And the version of you that wins depends on which one you feed more often. Sometimes the reason you can't move forward in life is because you haven't closed the things behind you. You're trying to climb with anchors tied to your legs. You're trying to rise with unresolved weight. Until you finish what you started, you cannot step into the next version of yourself with strength. The future you want requires the discipline to finish the present. Every unfinished task you complete lightens your mind. Every loop you close sharpens your focus. Every commitment you honor restores your inner order. Bit by bit, you rebuild the structure of your identity. Chapter 6. Repair your mindset. After failure. Failure is data, not identity. Failure is one of the most misunderstood experiences in life. Most people treat it like a verdict, as if a bad day reveals something permanent about who they are. They fall off their routine once and immediately start telling themselves stories that shouldn't belong to them. They begin to believe they are inconsistent, weak, undisciplined, or incapable. And once a person labels themselves, their behavior quickly falls into alignment with the label. A single failure does not define you. Your response to failure does. The real damage doesn't come from the mistake itself. The real damage comes from the shame spiral that follows it. The internal collapse, the self-blame, the silent disappointment that convinces you to stop trying. That spiral kills more dreams than failure ever could. Because failure is temporary, but shame makes it feel permanent. You have probably lived this cycle more times than you can count. You miss a workout, and suddenly the whole week is ruined. You break your diet, and suddenly the goal no longer matters. You skip one day of a habit, and immediately convince yourself that you've lost momentum. But momentum doesn't disappear just because you slipped. It disappears because you decide not to return. Comeback is a mindset. Shame is a trap. When you learn to detach failure from identity, everything changes. You stop treating mistakes like evidence. You stop treating setbacks like character flaws. You stop turning small slips into full collapses. Instead of abandoning your progress, you learn to repair your mindset and continue. Failure becomes a mirror, not a sentence. It reflects where you need to grow, where you need more structure, where your discipline needs reinforcement. It gives you information. It gives you clarity. It gives you the exact feedback you need to evolve. But you cannot receive that feedback if you are too busy punishing yourself. Self-punishment disguises itself as accountability. It feels like you're being responsible, but really, you're destroying your willingness to try again. You cannot build consistency from a place of shame. You can only build it from a place of understanding and correction. Correction is strength. Shame is sabotage. Most people stay trapped in cycles of inconsistency because they treat failure emotionally instead of strategically. When you take things personally, you lose perspective. You lose clarity. You lose the ability to ask the right questions. You cannot learn from something you are too busy hiding from. You cannot grow from something you refuse to examine. Failure becomes workable when you face it with honesty rather than judgment. It becomes useful when you ask yourself what went wrong instead of asking yourself what is wrong with you. The distinction is everything. One question guides you back to action. The other leads you into despair. Failure is not personal. Failure is mechanical. There is always a reason behind a setback. Maybe your environment wasn't supportive. Maybe your expectations were unrealistic. Maybe your energy was low. Maybe your structure wasn't strong enough. None of these mean anything about your worth. They simply mean something about your system. Systems can be rebuilt. Identity does not need to be destroyed to fix them. One of the strongest forms of discipline is learning how to reset quickly. Imagine what your life would look like if you stopped letting a single mistake destroy an entire week. Imagine if every setback became a moment of clarity rather than a reason to quit. Imagine if your response to failure was not collapse, but correction. Quick resets create unstoppable people. Slow shame creates fragile ones. When you recover quickly, you teach your mind resilience. You teach it that effort matters more than perfection. You teach it that returning is more important than avoiding mistakes. And over time, the way you interpret failure transforms. You no longer see it as a force that knocks you down. You begin to see it as a force that builds you. A strong mindset isn't one that never fails. A strong mindset is one that refuses to stay down. When you rise quickly, you disrupt the internal narrative that used to hold you captive. You prove to yourself that you are stronger than your setbacks. You prove that you can rebuild faster than you break. And that truth becomes the backbone of your discipline. There is also a quiet power in forgiving yourself. Not in a soft, passive way, but in a disciplined, intentional way. Forgiveness is not letting yourself off the hook. Forgiveness is removing emotional noise so you can return to the work. It is clearing the mental clutter that stops you from acting. It is strength disguised as softness. A mind weighed down by self-judgment cannot be consistent. A mind that understands and corrects itself can be unstoppable. Failure is not the opposite of progress. Failure is the path to progress. Think about every meaningful transformation you've ever witnessed. None of them happened in a straight line. They were built on setbacks, corrections, adjustments, and returns. The people who reach their potential are the ones who return the fastest, not the ones who never fall. Each time you fail and come back, your identity strengthens. The comeback is evidence. The comeback is growth. The comeback is the moment you prove you are no longer controlled by the weaker version of yourself. This repeated pattern becomes who you are. Someone who does not break. Someone who does not run. Someone who does not surrender to setbacks. You become the type of person who keeps going. You become the type of person who repairs quickly. You become the type of person who transforms through resilience. If you want to be consistent, you must master the skill of returning. You must learn to step back into action without hesitation. You must confront failure with reflection instead of shame. You must see setbacks as data, not identity. Failure is not the end. Failure is the instruction. Repair your mindset, not because you need to be perfect, but because you need to stay in motion. Repair your mindset because consistency is built on how you respond to the days you fall, not on the days when everything feels easy. Return quickly. Return calmly. Return with purpose. Chapter 7. Push when you want to quit. Consistency lives in the extra rep. There is a moment in every journey where your mind whispers, "Stop." This moment appears right when the work becomes uncomfortable, when the excitement fades, when the effort begins to stretch you. It is the point where the average person gives up and calls it a day. It is also the point where growth finally begins. Everything before that moment is warm-up. Everything after it is transformation. The desire to quit is not a sign of weakness. The desire to quit is a sign you are entering new territory. Your mind is built to protect you from discomfort. It will always try to pull you back to what is familiar, safe, and easy. The second things get challenging, your brain starts negotiating. Do it later. You've done enough. It doesn't matter. No one will know. But this negotiation is not truth. It is resistance disguised as logic. And if you obey it, you will never discover what you are capable of. There is a very specific moment, the breaking point, where your entire identity is being tested. It is the moment when it feels like you can't go on, when your energy dips, when frustration rises, when fatigue dissolves your willpower. Most people retreat here. They think the difficulty means they should stop. but the difficulty is proof they should continue. Growth begins exactly where comfort ends. If you always stop when things become hard, you train your mind to quit. You reinforce the pattern of giving up right before the breakthrough. You create a habit of retreat. And every retreat makes the next retreat easier. But when you push through that moment, even slightly, you teach your mind a completely different lesson, that you can endure more than you think. Pushing past the urge to quit is not about dramatic effort. It is about small defiance. It is the decision to continue for another breath, another step, another minute, another rep. These tiny extensions of effort are what separate those who transform from those who repeat the same year of their life over and over. A small push in the moment of resistance carries massive psychological weight. It tells your mind, "You don't run." That message accumulates. It gets stored in your identity. It strengthens your self-belief. It makes you someone who doesn't collapse under pressure. And once your identity changes, your behavior follows effortlessly. The moment you want to quit is the most important moment of your day. Not because of productivity, not because of discipline, but because of who you become in that moment. Every push strengthens the muscle of self-command. Every push trains your mind to withstand friction. Every push rewires your understanding of your limits. Your limits are almost always illusions. Your real capacity lives on the other side of resistance. The body can endure more than the mind prefers. The mind simply hates discomfort. It hates uncertainty. It hates struggle. It hates anything that challenges its familiar patterns. So when your mind screams at you to stop, your body almost always has more to give. The trick is learning to push just long enough for your mind to follow your body instead of leading it. When you push through resistance, something remarkable happens inside you. You feel a spark of pride you cannot buy or fake. You feel a deep internal power that whispers, "I kept going." That feeling becomes fuel. It becomes memory. It becomes evidence. Evidence that you can rely on yourself when things get hard. Self-respect is built in the moments you don't want to continue, but do anyway. The people you admire are not stronger than you. They have simply practiced discomfort more often than you. They have leaned into the edge instead of away from it. They have learned that pushing through resistance is where greatness is formed. And because they practice this repeatedly, their threshold expands, their resilience fortifies, and their capacity multiplies. Quitting is easy because quitting is a habit. Continuing is hard because continuing is a skill. Skills are trained, not inherited. You train the skill of continuing by staying one moment longer than your instinct tells you to. You don't need to double your effort or magically become superhuman. You just need to stay. Stay through the discomfort. Stay through the fatigue. Stay through the urge to escape. When staying becomes a habit, quitting becomes foreign to you. You no longer crumble when pressure rises. You no longer negotiate with your excuses. You no longer fear hard work because you know you can handle it. You have proof, built through every push, that you won't break. There is also a kind of spiritual power in continuing when everything inside you wants to quit. It builds a discipline beyond motivation, beyond mood, beyond circumstance. It builds a discipline born from identity. You become the kind of person who finishes what you start, no matter how many times you hit resistance. This is the identity of high performers. They are not immune to quitting. They simply do not obey the impulse. The moment you want to quit is your greatest opportunity. It is the doorway to the next version of you. You don't become stronger on the first few minutes of effort. You become stronger in the final few minutes. You don't evolve in the easy reps. You evolve in the final rep. You don't grow in comfort. You grow in conflict. And the conflict you feel when you want to quit is exactly what shapes you. Pushing through difficulty does not always feel heroic. Sometimes it feels dull, irritating, exhausting, or tedious. But discipline is not dramatic. Discipline is stubborn. It shows up when you don't want to. It pushes when you want to retreat. It holds the line when everything in you wants to lower it. Chapter 8. Replace old habits. Don't delete them. You cannot erase a habit. You replace it. Most people fail to change because they try to erase habits instead of replacing them. They try to force themselves to stop doing something without giving their mind something new to do instead. But the brain hates empty space. It hates a void. It hates having nothing to latch on to. So when you try to simply stop a habit, your mind pulls you right back into it because the old pattern is the only thing familiar. Habits do not disappear. Habits get overwritten. Your brain is a prediction machine. It learns patterns, it recognizes cues, and it anticipates what comes next. When a familiar situation appears, your mind automatically activates the behavior that used to follow. Not because it's good for you, not because it aligns with your goals, but because it is what you have repeated the most. This is why trying to quit a habit through willpower alone almost always fails. You are fighting a psychological automation using nothing but temporary emotion. And emotion never wins against repetition. Emotion fades. Automation fires whether you like it or not. Old habits survive because they have structure. New habits fail because they don't. If you want to change a behavior, you must keep the cue but change the response. You must redirect the energy of the old pattern into a new action. You don't remove the doorway. You simply choose to walk through a different room. This is how true behavioral transformation begins. Not through deletion, but through replacement. Imagine your habit loop as a well-worn path in a forest. You've walked it hundreds of times. It feels effortless. If you try to block the path without making a new one, you will eventually return to it because it is the easiest route. But if you carve a new path, walk it repeatedly, and make it clear and familiar, your mind will begin to choose the new route naturally. Your environment plays a massive role in this process. The objects around you influence your behavior more than you notice. A phone within reach triggers scrolling. A couch triggers laziness. A dark kitchen triggers snacking. These associations run deep. Changing your environment doesn't delete the old habit, but it weakens the impulse and strengthens the new action. But even more important than environment is intention. When the familiar urge appears, and it will, you must direct that urge into the new behavior. Not fight it, not fear it. Redirect it. The urge itself contains energy. If you try to suppress that energy, it pushes harder. If you redirect it, you transform it. Redirection beats suppression every time. Think about a habit you've tried to stop in the past. You probably told yourself, I won't do that anymore. But the moment the trigger appeared, your mind slipped right back into the old behavior because that's the only script it knew. This is not weakness. This is neuroscience. And the solution is not to get stronger. The solution is to rewrite the script. Replacement is the rewriting process. It gives the mind a new action to associate with the trigger. It creates a new pattern that, over time, becomes stronger than the old one. When the new pattern becomes your default response, the old habit loses its power. Old habits don't fade because they are bad. They fade because they are unused. One of the most powerful psychological shifts you can make is understanding that urges are not commands. They are suggestions. They are echoes from your past self, not instructions for your future self. When an urge appears, it is not telling you who you are. It is reminding you who you used to be. And you are allowed to ignore it. You are allowed to redirect it. You are allowed to replace it. Urges lose power the moment you stop obeying them. Replacing habits also changes the way you perceive yourself. When you repeatedly choose the new action, you begin to see yourself as someone who acts with intention rather than impulse. You begin to feel a sense of control that was missing before. This identity shift is the true reward, not just the habit itself, but the person you become by practicing it. Because identity grows through behavior, and behavior grows through repetition. Replacing habits isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming consistent. Every replacement action you make is a brick you lay in the foundation of your new identity. Even if the old habit resurfaces occasionally, it does not erase the progress you've made. What matters is the direction you choose most often. Consistency is built on majority patterns, not flawless patterns. There will be moments when the old habit feels stronger than the new one. Moments when you feel pulled backward. Moments when the old pattern feels easier. This does not mean you are failing. This means your brain is transitioning. Old wiring takes time to quiet down. New wiring takes time to strengthen. You're in the process of becoming, and the process itself is proof you're evolving. Change is repetition. Replacement is evolution. Chapter 9. Show up when no one is watching. Private discipline builds public success. There is a version of you that only exists when the room is empty. A version without an audience, without validation, without anyone to applaud or approve. This version, your private self, is the one that determines the entire trajectory of your future. Not the version people see, not the one you post online, not the one you perform for. The real you is the one who shows up in silence. Success is built in silence long before it is seen in public. Most people don't fail because they lack opportunity. They fail because they only try when someone is watching. They try when the pressure is on, when there's something to prove, when they feel inspired by recognition. But consistency isn't built in the spotlight, it's built in the shadows. The people who rise are the ones who work when the world is asleep, when no one knows, when no one claps. If you only show up when eyes are on you, you will never become powerful. You will only become performative. Performers collapse when applause fades. But disciplined people rise even higher because their strength isn't dependent on praise. Their work is internal. Their devotion is private. Their identity is rooted in effort, not attention. Doing the right thing when no one is watching is the purest form of character. It is also the purest form of freedom. When your discipline is real, no one needs to monitor you. No one needs to motivate you. No one needs to remind you who you want to be. You become self-directed, self-governed, self-respecting. You operate from internal standards, not external pressure. And when your standards drive you, consistency becomes natural. There is a reason some people leap ahead while others stay stagnant despite having the same opportunities. The difference is not talent. The difference is not luck. The difference is what they do in private. One person scrolls. Another person studies. One person complains. Another person practices. One person avoids difficulty. Another confronts it quietly, day after day. Private habits shape public outcomes, always. If you want to change your life, you must first change your private hours. You must confront how you behave when the world isn't looking. You must ask yourself the questions no one else will. What do I do when boredom hits? What do I do when no one expects anything from me? What do I do when I have the freedom to choose? Those answers reveal the truth you cannot hide from. Your private actions are the blueprint of your future self. Most people underestimate the psychological power of their private choices. When you show up alone, you send a message to your mind that your goals matter, not because they impress someone, but because they define you. You become someone who honors commitments even without witnesses. This is where self-respect grows. This is where internal strength forms. Self-respect grows in the dark. Consistency grows in the quiet. When you rely on other people's attention to take action, your discipline becomes fragile. It crumbles the moment the spotlight disappears. It collapses when life becomes quiet. But when you develop the ability to work without recognition, you become unstoppable. Nothing external can shake a discipline that is rooted inside you. There is something sacred about working in silence. There is an intimacy between you and your ambition that no audience can participate in. This intimacy strengthens your connection to your future. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you honest. It keeps you committed in a way public accountability never could. The world sees the performance. The world never sees the preparation. And preparation is where greatness is forged. It is in the early mornings when no one is awake. It is in the late nights when no one is checking in. It is in the unglamorous moments where you choose effort over ease, discipline over distraction, purpose over comfort. Those decisions stack. They accumulate. They form the architecture of your identity. Your identity isn't shaped by what you do occasionally. It's shaped by what you do privately and repeatedly. The quiet work is uncomfortable because it doesn't offer instant reward. There is no applause, no feedback, no recognition. Just you, your effort, and your standards. But that's where the transformation happens. If you can show up for yourself when no one is watching, you will never struggle to show up when people are. Showing up privately builds a different kind of strength, a strength rooted in authenticity, a strength that doesn't require validation to exist, a strength that lasts. Because no matter what happens externally, opinions, setbacks, failures, distractions, your discipline remains intact. It was built away from the noise. It was built away from everything that could weaken it. The strongest people you know are not impressive because of what they do publicly. They're impressive because of the thousands of invisible hours behind it. The rehearsals no one saw, the practice sessions no one acknowledged, the sacrifices no one thanked them for. They were consistent in silence long before the world ever cared. Chapter 10. Repeat your foundations. Every day, consistency becomes identity. There comes a point in every transformation where the work stops being exciting and starts becoming ordinary. This is where most people fall apart. They crave novelty, intensity, something new to chase. But growth is not built in novelty. Growth is built in repetition. The foundation is where strength is created, and the foundation is what people abandon first. Repetition is not punishment. Repetition is identity training. The reason you return to old habits is because the identity behind the new habits has not been reinforced enough. You tried a new routine for a few days, maybe a week, but you never repeated it long enough for your brain to rewrite who you are. It stayed at the level of effort, not identity. And anything that doesn't reach the identity level eventually fades away. Identity is built through what you repeat, not what you occasionally attempt. Every day you show up, even imperfectly, you tell your mind who you are. You teach it what to expect from you. You reinforce the story you want to live. But every time you abandon the fundamentals, you weaken the structure that consistency depends on. The foundation cracks, the momentum dies, and the old version of you quietly returns. The old you waits at the door of every inconsistency. The new you is strengthened through daily fundamentals. Your foundations are simple. They are the habits that support clarity, energy, focus, and self-respect. They are not flashy or impressive. They're rarely the kind of habits you brag about. But they hold your life together. They create a stable internal environment where discipline can thrive. Most people fail because they stop doing the things that worked. They stop the habits that made them stronger. They abandon the behaviors that created momentum in the first place. They rise a little, get comfortable, and then let the basics slip. And when the basics slip, everything else collapses. Mastery is not upgraded by changing everything. Mastery is upgraded by repeating what works. There is a quiet power in doing the essential things daily, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. The consistency of repetition strengthens your internal leadership. It sharpens your self-image. It makes discipline automatic instead of emotional. And when discipline becomes automatic, transformation becomes inevitable. The strongest identities are not built on intensity, they are built on maintenance. This is why athletes return to fundamentals no matter how advanced they become. This is why musicians practice scales long after they've mastered their instrument. This is why great thinkers review basic principles even at the height of their careers. They understand something the average person ignores. The foundation is never beneath you. It is always supporting you. When you skip your foundations, you lose alignment with yourself. You feel ungrounded, unfocused, reactive. You start operating from emotion instead of structure. But when you repeat your foundations, you create internal order. You create momentum. You create stability. And stability is the birthplace of long-term growth. Stability doesn't shrink you. Stability frees you. It frees your mind from chaos. It frees your energy from inconsistency. It frees your focus to move in a single direction instead of being scattered everywhere. Repetition creates this stability. It creates the conditions for you to operate at your highest capacity. There will be days when the basics feel boring, days when repetition feels uninspiring, days when you want something new, something thrilling, something different. But these urges are not a sign that your foundations aren't working. They're a sign that your mind is craving stimulation, not progress. The mind loves stimulation, but stimulation doesn't build identity. Repetition does. Your greatness is built in the days that feel the same. When you honor your foundations on ordinary days, extraordinary results accumulate in the background. You won't feel the transformation immediately. You won't see dramatic changes overnight, but your identity will strengthen quietly, consistently, relentlessly. And one day you'll look back and realize you became someone entirely different without any single dramatic moment. Identity change is rarely loud. Identity change is consistent. Most people focus on what to add: new goals, new habits, new systems, when the real power comes from repeating what already works. You don't need to transform everything. You need to stabilize what matters. You need to protect the fundamentals that build discipline. A solid identity is not built in bursts. It is built in cycles. Cycles of showing up. Cycles of effort. Cycles of repetition. When you repeat your foundations, you create predictability in your life. Predictability leads to confidence. Confidence leads to stronger action. Stronger action leads to even more consistency. This is how momentum compounds. This is how identity becomes self-reinforcing instead of self-sabotaging. Your identity cannot be built on occasional excellence. It must be built on consistent fundamentals. Every time you return to your foundation, you reclaim control over your life. You quiet the noise. You reject the chaos. You strengthen your resilience. You remind yourself that you are someone who follows through, not because you feel like it, but because it is who you are. You don't rise by chance. You rise by consistency. Now that you've reached the end of this journey, you can see something clearly. Consistency was never about talent, motivation, or luck. It was always about identity. Every chapter you've heard has been guiding you toward one truth. You must become the kind of person who shows up for themselves, not the kind who waits for perfect conditions, not the kind who starts strong and fades, but the kind who follows through because it is who they are. You have learned that consistency isn't born in excitement. Consistency is born in the quiet, ordinary moments where no one is watching. This is the part most people never understand. They chase intensity, they chase the next burst of motivation, they chase a version of themselves that appears only when life feels convenient. But convenience doesn't build anyone. Pressure does. Discomfort does. Repetition does. And now you know how to use all of it. You know how to turn discomfort into growth. You know how to turn structure into discipline. You know how to turn small promises into unshakable self-trust. Each chapter has been a piece of armor you didn't know you needed. Your mornings became a battlefield you can now win. Your focus became a resource you learned to protect. Your failures became information rather than identity. The voice that once tried to make you quit is now something you recognize, something you can push through, something that no longer owns you. You have learned to replace your old habits instead of fighting them. You've learned that real character is built in private. You've learned that your foundations matter more than your feelings. And slowly, quietly, powerfully, you've become someone different by practicing differently. This is the moment you step into the new identity you've been building across every chapter. Identity is not something you discover. Identity is something you train. You trained it when you chose action over impulse. You trained it when you continued even when you didn't want to. You trained it when you returned after failing instead of collapsing under shame. And now your mind holds evidence that you can rely on yourself. That evidence is your leverage. That evidence is your new standard. That evidence is what will carry you into the next stage of your life. Because consistency is not about doing everything perfectly. Consistency is about returning, no matter what.